Mirë se vini në emisionin tonë të radhës së Tash e Tutje. Sot do të bisedojmë për çështjen e regjimit të vizave për Ballkanin Perëndimor dhe Bashkimin Evropian, përkatësisht për përpjekjet reja jonit në mruajtjen e vizave dhe udhëtimit të lirë në Bashkimin Evropian, dhe në pjesën e dytë do të bisedojmë lidhur me gjasat e Kosovës dhe përpjekjet e Kosovës për të hequr vizat për udhëtim të lirë në Bashkimin Evropian. Për këtë temë në studio sot kemi ftuar zëdhënësin e Komisionerës Evropiane për çështjet e brendshme, zëdhënësin e Komisionerës Cecilia Malmström. Në studio me neve është zëdhënësi pra Michele Cercone. Mr. Cercone, thanks for coming to our 30 minutes debate from now on. I just told to our viewers that we will try to discuss the ongoing efforts of the regional countries to maintain the visa-free regime, and then the second part of the debate, of the interview, then the chances of Kosovo scrapping the visas and free travel into the EU Schengen zone. But first, perhaps we should, I ask your permission and talk a little bit, trying to detect the mood inside EU member countries following the complaints of some of the EU member states related to the increasing numbers of asylum seekers inside the EU, comparing for 2011 and 2012. There has been an increase despite the pressure of the EU member countries to the regional countries to put down the numbers. What's going on exactly currently?
Well, we have a difficult situation. We cannot hide that our concerns are based on the fact that trends keep going upwards. We don't see a decrease in number of asylum requests presented in EU countries by citizens coming from Western Balkan countries that have recently benefited from visa liberalization. Now, let's be clear on the fact that the vast majority of these requests are rejected because there's no ground, there's no real basis for asking for asylum. And this is, of course, creating many problems. First problem is a problem that is detrimental also to what I would call those who are in need of international protection, because the number of people claiming for asylum and unfunded requests for asylum do represent a burden. They create longer waiting time. They do have as a consequence the fact that national administration have to deal with a number of claims that are not funded. And this, of course, diverts resources, money and time from the assessment and from the procedures to recognize and to give international protection to those who really are in need of it. So there is, first of all, a problem that really concerns directly asylum seekers. And of course, there is another problem which is linked to costs, because all of this doesn't come just for free. There are human resources, national administrations that have to be allocated for these specific issues. And of course, this creates discontent and concerns and worries in member states, especially because of the fact that there are increasing trends that don't seem to diminish.
But how can we explain the fact that despite all these explanations to the citizens of the region that they cannot obtain a political asylum, or if you go back to the figure, perhaps not more than 1% of those who requested asylum in the country have obtained it. But despite these explanations, despite the pressure to the countries of the region, despite the measure of punishment measures that the countries and region had undertaken, the figures are going up. What does it say? Is the life so miserable in the region?
I think that that's a series of different causes. We cannot really find just one explanation. I would start from the fact that we are talking about part of a trend and a part of a, let's say, wave that has begun with the visa liberalization. And so it is difficult that the measures that have been taken could have a direct and immediate impact. I would say that we still have to wait a little bit to see the impact of these measures. Now, it is just very preliminary figures that we have received, but if we look at the first period of 2013, which is still to be confirmed,
yes,
it seems that these trends are probably going a little bit down or staying at the same level, which would be at least a first signal that some of these measures have started to work. So I would say that there is no immediate cause and effect relationship between the introduction of the measures and the fact that the figures continue to increase, because there has not been enough time for these measures to be effective. I guess that our next report that is scheduled in June will probably give us a better overview and a more concrete idea of where we are, hopefully signaling that the measures taken are actually working and that the trends are decreasing. When it comes to the efforts made, of course, we do recognize that Balkan countries who have benefited from visa liberalization have been very active, have been doing a lot. They've been trying to follow the Commission in its at least main proposals and main lines. It is clear that some of the problems are very deeply rooted inside the countries when it comes to the living condition of minorities in certain areas, situations in certain rural areas, distribution of information and information campaigns which are not very able to reach some very isolated points. That's something that will require time, but of course it will also require a long-term commitment, because some of these problems and some of the living conditions which are very poor or very difficult for minorities sometimes need long time to be dealt with.
Looking to the whole roadmap criteria set to those countries who are benefiting and to Kosovo who is trying to benefit, I personally didn't see so much emphasis from the European Commission toward the authoritarian countries in order to make disappear the social and economic reasons for those people seeking inside refuge or asylum inside the EU. So, are perhaps we are missing the point? That reasons, I mean, most of the main reasons are the people seek a better life outside and inside the EU. So perhaps is there a need that the countries from the region should invest more on improving the social economic life of these vulnerable people? Well,
let's look at what we have. Let's look at the facts. Facts tell us that, as you rightly stress, that a really tiny percentage of people who do request asylum in the EU coming from those countries do have access to protection, which we're talking about. If I think the average should be around 0.3, between 0.3 and
yes.
0.7. So this means that the vast majority are people who are coming. Sometimes they are abused themselves. They don't know the reality, or they're not exactly aware of what they're doing. They are really misled by some, I would say, smugglers and traffickers. Sometimes they do know that probably they are not going to get asylum, but for them it's a way to try to find better,
whether it's true or not.
To find, or also to find better living conditions. Most of them are what we call economic migrants, who probably would like to settle down in Europe to find for a better future. Of course, this is something that has to be acknowledged and recognized, but the fact that this goes via the asylum system is a very problematic issue that we have to tackle.
Can we perhaps a little bit go and try to detect these problems according to the figures? In Serbia and Kosovo, there's been an increase, according to UNHCR and Eurostat, numbers increase of 12% in 2012 compared to 11. Then in Albania, increase is quite serious, 141%. In Macedonia is 44%, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina is 119%. Now, these figures are quite worrying for those countries who are handling the issue of asylum seekers, and the pressure is quite increasing from the member countries, especially 5 or 6 of them, toward the Commission and the Parliament. Now, there is debate between the three institutions, Parliament, Commission, and the Council of the EU, whether to introduce that mechanism of visa suspension or not. How is Commission and the Parliament going to deal with the pressure of the member countries?
Well, let's also start from a very important point of view. Visa liberalization, it's a real achievement.
Yes.
Let's start from the point that vast majority of those citizens coming from those countries are benefiting and using it in a very lawful way. So this is an achievement. It's a success story, but it has, of course, like all success stories, some problems that we have to tackle. Now, how do we tackle the problems? Let me dispel a myth also.
Okay.
The safeguard clause and the clause for introducing visa requirement is not something specific for the Balkans. Let's be clear about it.
Yes.
It is a general clause that is to be introduced in order to harness, to give to the European Union a tool that in case of, let's say, very last resort, could be used, but not just for the Balkans. You know that there are many countries, dozens of countries,
of origin, yes.
and also countries with the benefit of visa liberalization with the EU all around the world. So let's not also point the finger on the Balkans only. It is something that would be helpful and would certainly help the liberalization process itself. Because once we have a clause, once we have a clause in place that will allow to intervene in case of really extreme resort, then member states will also be more confident and probably will be reassured when it comes to paving the way and opening new visa liberalization processes all around the world. So I think it's, on one hand, also an important tool, and it's a useful tool when it comes also to defend visa liberalization. Because also, let's see, and probably Commissioner Malmström said it at many occasions, but visa liberalization is something that is good. It's something that has to be there, and we have to work together. Now, as you say, there is some pressure, there are some problems. We don't hide it, we face it, and we want to work together with the countries, especially the countries from the Western Balkans who are experiencing some of these problems, in order to solve the situation. And this is also why we presented a number of, let's call it recommendations, guidelines, as you want, for those countries in order to take action. And between the different points, and you know that there are 5 main points that have to be dealt with, and I would say that pointing out 1 or 2, I would say that addressing the living situation, the situation of minorities is one of the, or it's probably the most important for the moment, because that's where the core of the problem lies.
Speaking a few days ago with the member of the Parliament, Tanja Fajon, she was saying to our viewers that there is pressure that this year, because of the overall asylum seekers coming from all over the world, from Arab countries, Afghanistan, etc., including the Balkans, then this mechanism of visa suspension is almost nearly there. And she was saying also that because of this, then 1 or 2 countries from the region might as well get the visa suspension. Is this something realistic? Does the Commission perhaps share the same opinion?
Well, for the Commission, this is a tool that might be used in the future as a last resort, but we're not aiming at any specific country at the moment. There is no plan.
Serbia and Macedonia has been more in most cases has been tipped as a problematic.
I think I can reassure at this point all the Western Balkans citizens. At this point in time, there is no specific plan by the European Commission aiming at this or at suspension of visa liberalization.
The 6 countries who are pressuring and delivering on the visa suspension.
We are working on really in parallel. We're working with the countries within the European Union in order to listen to their concerns and trying to understand what they need, how to assist them and how to help them out, and at the same time working together with the Western Balkan countries in order to also listen from their side to help them as much as we can. But of course, we need to see that those countries take action and that they go in the right direction now. But I would say that we'll have to wait until June, until next report, to see if we can see a certain confirmation of this first trends that are not growing or are even decreasing. If that was the case, that maybe the idea that trends are for the first time not moving upwards might certainly also help in having a more, let's say, less emergency-based debate and dialogue also with some member states. But I repeat, if we see that the measures start to work, which I hope and we all hope, then countries in Western Balkans will have to follow up and to live up to their commitments in order to make sure that they continue to work and they continue to be active from this point of view.
Kosovo is the only country which is not benefiting from the visa liberalization. There has been a first report earlier in February. There have been some applause by the Commission in terms of reforms, especially in adopting legislation. But then, if you go deeper and analyze the report of the Commission, Kosovo has tremendous job to do in terms of implementation. Now, is Kosovo going in the right way or having liberalized the visa?
We can certainly say so. We can say that the direction is the good one. There is an effort that is done. There are results that have to be recognized clearly. And of course, as we always say when we start this visa liberalization dialogue, these are content-based dialogues. These are aiming at a common and shared result, which is visa liberalization. Because visa liberalization is not something that Kosovo wants and the European Commission is trying Kosovo to avoid. It's the contrary. We're working together to the same aim, to have the same target. But we need to reach this target doing and going through the right pattern, doing the right things, and respecting the same benchmarks and criteria that countries before Kosovo have been respecting. So that's where we are at the moment. There are a number of things that have to be done, certainly. The effort is there. It's not going to be an easy and immediate road, as it was for other countries. It will take some time, but focusing step by step on the, let's say, priorities, on the things that are identified, on the issues that have to be solved, I'm sure that little by little we're going in the right direction and that this will lead to the good news that we all hope we will one day reach.
Kosovo government officials, including the Prime Minister and the Minister of Interior, have been quite strongly criticizing the EU as a whole that they are not being fair toward Kosovo and they should, by the last year perhaps, according to them, to scrap the visas. Now, but looking to what they have to do, there is a kind of clash between what they say and between what they have to do. So, where can this criticism lead?
Let me stress something. Every time we went through a visa liberalization dialogue with a country, at the beginning and at a certain point, we observed the same trends, which is...
So it's nothing new from Pristina.
But it's also normal, because those who are making the effort, they are of course eager to go as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and of course they want to see their progress recognized. At a certain point, there is always this kind of comparison, saying, oh, but with this other country, you made it a bit easier. With this other country, it went quicker. With this other country, things were not as stringent, as safeguards were not as robust. Well, if you look all together, so now with a little experience, probably I can try to make this comparison, well, you will see astonishingly that the trends and the patterns are almost always the same, that the duration and time span, it's very much the same. And you also go through, if you go through the different set criteria and benchmarks, you will realize that they really are based on the same principle, on the same necessities, and on the same need to have that specific outcome.
Can you cut you here? The Kosovo government especially complaining to the numbers of the points that have been written. In terms of pages, for example, Kosovo has 15 pages of the benchmark. Albania has 7. Kosovo has 94 to 96 points, and Albania had perhaps half of it. So could we perhaps here say that Kosovo authorities are trying to put the ball at the other side and satisfy saying that we are doing a good job, but that it's you who is not willing because of the trends of the asylum seekers and financial and economic crisis?
Well, if you look in terms of, I think it's not something you can do to look at the roadmaps in terms of how long it is, how many points there are.
But they are using it.
Well, as you will understand, I will not enter into this this commenting over these specificities. But I think that you should also keep, for example, one thing that also always struck me is that if you look at the other roadmaps, you will find that the other roadmaps were also accompanied by a certain series of guidelines that in the Kosovo case are not there. So the roadmap is the only document. So this would explain some minor or some differences because of this. But let's also be clear. This is also tailor-made. On one hand, we have to have the same benchmarks and the same criteria against which we have to assess the progress of those who want to benefit from visa liberalization. At the same time, you have to look at the specificity of each country. And of course, you have to design and really tailor-made the different needs and the different measures and actions that have to be implemented against the background of that specific country, of its own specific situation. So, of course, it would be a bit strange to have a kind of blueprint that would be exactly the same for all countries. This one-size-fits-all would never work. So let's also accept the fact that we are asking, basically, to use, and we're using the same benchmarks, the same criteria, but, of course, we are adapting it to the specificities of the countries that we're dealing with. So, of course, this will result always in different, probably differences of various nature. But if you look at the 4 blocks, for example, you will see that they are all the same. Of course, the specificities come in the detail.
Speaking about the 4 blocks and reading carefully, for me, the most critical for Kosovo is the block 3 on public order and security, which then is related to organized crime, corruption. Kosovo is known, according to many reports, being the most corrupted country in the region. Now, how serious is Kosovo and how seriously is behind the other countries in this issue in terms of tackling it really?
Well, it's, at this point, it's a bit hard to kind of have conclusions about how serious is the commitment and how things are going, because as you know, we are, as European Commission, we are just waiting for in the next weeks to receive from Kosovo their report, and we will then use it as a first, let's say, basis of assessment and analysis to see what the follow-up can be. So I would rather avoid like drawing conclusions now where exactly we are waiting for this kind of information to be given. I would say that there is a lot of work that has been done. There is a serious commitment. Allow me not to enter into details, because when you have ongoing negotiations, it's never really wise to discover your cards and or to give all the details about it.
I will be sorry, but I will insist. Because I had a feedback by Kosovo government Ministry of Integration, and they pointed out 2 or 3 points that and they don't agree with the European Commission in its February report. And especially they disagree on the assessment of a Europol report in 2011, which is based on the figures in 2010, and that's related to the fight against drug transfer coming from Afghanistan, Latin America. I mean, we know that not only Kosovo, but the whole region is being used as a transit route. But here I will ask to discuss with you. The roadmap also mentions the role of EULEX, EU mission on rule of law. Now, having in regard that the EU mission there has not only monitoring and advising role, but also executive role, this is kind of perfect world, having both authorities fighting against the phenomena, corruption and organized crime, but also EULEX. But after 4 years of EULEX presence, Kosovo is the most corrupted country in the region. Now, is there a game of blame between the two, which we hear in Pristina, saying that EULEX is not doing enough, then EULEX say, no, it's your job. So how can we move from the situation of blaming each other and still not delivering on the issue?
Well, it is not certainly, as you will understand, it is not here and now for the European Commission to start commenting on something that would take a long time. Just to be clear,
a response to be clear, the Commission as well.
Given EULEX's role in developing the rule of law in Kosovo, the roadmap effectively requires effective cooperation by Kosovo authorities with the mission, including in discharging its executive mandate. That's exactly the point. So, of course, there has to be cooperation. We expect to see this cooperation. We expect to see the results. Has this been achieved yet? Is this in the right direction? Well, this is one of the points where probably the performance that was assessed in our report was not exactly the most brilliant. So probably some more work needs to be done. I would really ask to wait and see until the next report to understand a bit better, to have a better feedback, and also to base our reaction on facts, because it's always not very wise to, as you say, sometimes we talk or we comment on the basis of information or facts and figures that are not the most recent. So we risk to have not the latest scenario, not the most updated scenario. So allow me to wait until when we will have more concrete facts and figures on which to express a comment.
I will go back to the pressure or request of the EU member states on the countries from where we have seen the increase of asylum seekers, especially on restrictive, or if I may call them, a punishment measures for those who have misused the visa-free travel, which relates to the confiscation of passports for at least 2 years. This is the case that's been happening in Macedonia already. Now, would Kosovo have to undergo the same criteria in the future?
Let's also be clear on this. When we identified the measures, of course, we left a certain room for maneuver for those countries in order to tackle the problem with the appropriate tools. This means that there must be also a limit, which is respect for fundamental rights and human rights that cannot be surpassed. Those countries really need also to be very clear on this, and we are very clear to them. We understand that sometimes they feel such a pressure that this could result, theoretically, into going even too far in that direction. The fundamental rights and human rights respect is crucial, and this is something that also Commissioner Malmström attaches a lot of importance. So let me make clear the fact that all measures or all actions that are taken have to be, let's say, proportionate to the result that they want to achieve. And probably an excessive pressure or very stringent measures are not, let's say, do not have to go over and to be exaggerated, because you risk to have another impact, which is not respecting sometimes human and fundamental rights. So our concern is also linked to that. But more specifically, let's say that the immediate curbing of the trends, it is something important, but in the Commission's view, it is more important to address the root causes. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're always talking about trends. We're not talking about absolute or full figures or numbers, because basing our assessment only on numbers would probably be misleading, because some of the root causes will take long time to be eradicated, or at least to be tackled efficiently. So we need also to give the time to these measures to be effective. And to do so, we will also have to look at the trends. That's why trends are very important to us. They are crucial. We're not saying, well, there are 200 people here more, 200 people here less. What we're saying is, let's see and let's try to have as a target the fact that we will start seeing the trends, as always happens. Like now they've been peaking in 2012. Now we hope that they will start remaining stable or slowly decreasing in beginning first six months 2013, and then we can assess this and see if we're on the right track and then try to curb it down even more, because it would mean that the measures are working. But these measures, in order also to have their real impact, they will need some time. So this is why we look at trends and not specifically at figures.
We are approaching the end of the debate. A last question. There is still a little bit of confusion in terms of whether the EU, because of the 5 countries who have not recognized Kosovo's independence, can liberalize the visa for Kosovo. Does the Commission has cleared out this issue with the member states? Reading the roadmap and the report, we feel that the Commission said that it should be done, there is no legal obstacle, but then the member countries have to decide on this.
Well, let me be clear on this. Kosovo already features in what is called the negative list under entities and territorial authorities that are not recognized as states by at least one member state. This is the definition. There is, I think, a precedent that is very important. That is the precedent of Taiwan. Yeah. Taiwan, which is not recognized by any EU member states, was transferred to the positive list in December 2010. So there is already a legal precedent for transferring entities and territories from one list to the other list. So, of course, the Commission would certainly clearly prefer Kosovo's status to be resolved in a satisfactory manner, but this should have no impact on lifting the visa requirements at the end of the visa liberalization dialogue.
So in the end of the road, the Commission doesn't see any legal obstacles once the conditions are met. There
is a legal precedent of Taiwan, so we see that based on this precedent, we don't think that the situation can have an impact in terms of lifting the visa requirement at the end of the visa liberalization process.
Mr. Cercone, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.